Okay, so in the previous lesson, we have created auth context provider and wrap these components to make them reach the auth context data. So in this video, I'd like to show you how to consume two different contexts inside of a single component. So far, we have seen two separate ways to consume context. I've shown you this way where we say static context type is equal to whatever context we want to use. Or we say consumer like this, and then get the context object in this function. So if we want to use two separate contexts inside of a component, how do we do that? Because let's say for now we have two contexts, and we have the theme context and the auth context, and we want to use both of them inside of one component. Okay, so inside the to-do list component, if I wanted to do, say, static context type equal to auth context, I couldn't say static context type is equal to auth context, right? We couldn't do this. It's not going to work because we have two static properties with the same name, right? So that's not going to work. So we have a couple of options here. One option is we could use one context. So this way, using the context type property, and then the other one is going to use the consumer tag down here. And I mean, we can use the static context type for the theme context, and then the consumer tag for the auth context. That might make sense. And the second option is we can just use consumer tags, and then we can nest one inside the other. And that's the way I want to show you how to do that in this video. So I'm going to do it inside the navbar component for now. Okay, so we have one consumer tag here, and we're going to create another one for auth context. So what I'm going to do here is surround all of this right here with auth context consumer. Now to do that, I'm just going to go up here and import the auth context. So let's copy this and paste it in here and change these to auth context. And that's because both are under the same directory. And then I'm going to create auth context consumer tag here. And I'll close that off. So this expects a function. So let's open up an object and inside of it, call that function. And it's going to return some JSX. Okay, so now this function is going to take in a context object. So I'm going to call this auth context. Now I'm not calling it context because we already have that down here, right? So let's call this one theme context. All right, so we'll change this one. Okay. So now inside this top function, all we're going to do is return some JSX. Okay, so I'm just going to return the JSX inside these parentheses. So what we want to return is all of this stuff right here. So let's just copy and paste that in here. Okay, so now we have access to two different contexts inside this component. So we can access auth context and theme context. Okay, so I'm going to do a similar thing to destructure some information from auth context. Because remember, we had this stuff right here is logged in, and we also have change auth status, and we have passed both of those into the value property. So let's do our little bit of destructuring in here. So to grab those, I'll say const, and we want is logged in. And we also want change auth status. And we're going to get all from auth context. So now we have access to both of those things, change auth status, callback, and is logged in value. Now we can use these values in this JSX blocks. Okay, so let's use these values in here. So underneath the H1 tag, I'm going to do a P tag, and inside of that, I'm going to output whether the user is logged in or logged out. So to do that, I just evaluate this with a Boolean value. If this is logged in value is going to be true, we're going to show logged in as our text. Otherwise, we're going to show logged out for the text on the browser. And again, I'm going to use a ternary operator, and to do that, I'll just open up curly braces in the P tag, and I'll say is logged in, which is going to be evaluated to be true or false. And if it's true, we'll say logged in, and if it's false, we'll say logged out. Okay, so now we can add a click event to this P tag. And whenever we click on it, we're going to call this change auth status callback, and then toggle this is logged in value. Now remember, this change auth status callback is toggling the is logged in. So I'm going to give the onClick event to the P tag. And then whenever we click on this P tag, I'm going to call this change auth status callback like so. Okay, so initially this is logged in is false. And in this case, we're going to show this logged out text on the browser. Then if we click on this P tag, we're going to call this change auth status callback, and this will toggle the is logged in state. Then we will pass the new values as props to this thing, and then we'll grab those values in here and we'll show the other case in the browser. Okay, so let's save all this and we'll test it. So go back to the browser, and now we can see logged out as we toggle this. It's logged me in and out. It seems to be working. What do you know? Now, it's not actually logging me in or out, but it's just changing what we display right here, right? And everything else still works as well. That's good. The theme context is still working, and that's fine too. Okay, so now we're consuming two different contexts in one single component. And that's how you consume a couple of different contexts in a single component. And sure, okay, so that's fine, but it actually becomes a lot easier to do all of this when we use the Context API in combination with React hooks. Remember that? Well, I mean, we didn't go over it, but I teased you with it, all right? So that means that we're not going to have to do all of this consumer stuff right here. So we're going to talk about React hooks and how they work with Context API, which is going to make working with all of this kind of stuff even easier. So we'll pause right here, and then in the next lesson, we'll dive right into React hooks. So I'll see you in the next lesson.